Okay, this lesson is going to seem almost identical to the last lesson on parallel lines and their relationship, their angle relationships. This is actually all going to be the converse of what we just did last lesson. So for example, the corresponding angle converse says that if a pair of corresponding angles is congruent, then the two lines that form them are parallel. So if they told you right off the bat that this angle was 35 and this angle was 35, because they're corresponding angles and because they're congruent, we're allowed to say that line L is parallel to line M. Before, we were told that the lines were parallel, and then we concluded that corresponding angles were congruent. Now we're doing the converse of that. Now we're being told that the corresponding angles are congruent, and we are concluding that now the lines are parallel. So if you have a pair of corresponding angles that is not congruent, so if they're not congruent, so as you see here, this corresponding angle is 35, and its corresponding angle is 27. They're not congruent. Then we can conclude that line L is not parallel. I'm just going to put a slash mark through parallel. Is not parallel to line M. All right, our alternate interior angles converse says that if a pair of alternate interior angles is congruent, so here we have 101 and 101. These are alternate interior angles because they form that Z. We're shown that they are congruent. Then we can conclude that line L and line M are parallel. So line L is parallel to line M. Before we were told that the lines were parallel and we concluded that alternate interior angles were congruent. Now we're being told that the angles are congruent. So now the lines are parallel. If the alternate interior angles are not congruent, so do you see these alternate interior angles? They're still called alternate interior angles, whether they're congruent or not. But when they're not congruent, so this is 35, this is 70 or 27, then we can conclude that the lines are not parallel. So line L is not parallel this time to line M. The alternate exterior angles converse says that if a pair of alternate exterior angles is congruent, so here and here are my alternate exterior angles, and we're shown that they're congruent, they're both 101 degrees, we're allowed to say that line L is parallel to line M. But if we're told that, let me erase some of this. But if we're shown that the pair of alternate exterior angles is not congruent, so this one's 98 and this one's 120, they're alternate exterior angles, but they're not congruent. Now we can say that line L is not parallel to line M because alternate exterior angles are not congruent here. So when they are congruent, the lines are parallel. When they're not congruent, the lines are not parallel. Then we have the consecutive interior angles. If consecutive interior angles are supplementary, so 101 plus 79, that equals 180, that is supplementary, then that means that we have parallel lines. So if they're supplementary, then the lines that form them are parallel. But if they're not supplementary, so 117 and 35 gives us 151, that's not parallel. So, or not supplementary. So then the lines are not parallel. So we can say that line L is not parallel to line M. So in order to do the next set of problems, you have to have a very strong foundation on your names of your angle relationships and what they're supposed to be. So our first example says, determine which two lines, if any, are parallel. And then I'll explain why. So here, what I always do, and this is why your first couple chapters were so important with vertical angles and linear pairs, because vertical angles and linear pairs are always supplementary or congruent and supplementary. That we don't have to have parallel lines to have that relationship. So always fill in your linear pairs, 103 and subtracted from 180 is going to give you is going to give you 77. So this angle here is 77 degrees. I'm going to fill in my linear pair with this set of angles. Well, this is 77 and linear to that or supplementary to that was 103. And this angle is also 103. Then I'm going to do linear over here. Well, if this angle is 100 and linear to that angle would give us that this angle is 80 degrees. So I filled in all my linear pairs. Now I'm going to look for angle relationships that exist within those angle pairs. Well, if you notice, 77 and 77, those are corresponding angles and they are congruent. So because corresponding angles are congruent, then I can determine that the lines that form them are parallel. So line A is parallel to line B. On the other end of it, I had this angle which was 77 and this angle which is 100. Well, these two angles, 77 and 100, those are consecutive interior. And consecutive interior angles are supposed to be supplementary. Well, are 177 supplementary? No, that would equal 177. So because consecutive interior angles are not supplementary, then B is not parallel to the line below it. All right, the next example says find x and the measure of ZYN, so here's ZYN, so that PQ is parallel to MN. So PQ is parallel to MN, then this angle PXW, angle PXW, and this angle NYZ, angle NYZ, are alternate exterior angles. And if the lines are parallel, how can we make sure that alternate exterior angles are congruent? Well, we set 11x minus 25 equal to 7x plus 35. And solving for x, I would subtract 11 from both sides. So I would get 4x minus 25 equals 35. I'd add 25 to both sides. So I would get 4x equals 60. I would divide by 4 on both sides. So I would get 60 into 4 would be, oops, what did I do there? 115. So x in this case is going to be 15. And then don't stop there because it said find x and the measure of ZYN. So ZYN said 7 times x, which is 15, plus 35. And after we find that, we want to find this angle and make sure that they're congruent. So I'm going to go ahead and plug 11 times 7 minus 25. So 7 times 15, 15 times 7 is 105 plus 35 is 140. So that gives me the answer to this. Assuming I did that math right, I did it really quick. 11 times 7 is 77 minus 25. Oh wait, 11 times 15. Okay, so 15 times 11 gives me 165. And 165 minus 25 gives me 140. So they both equaled 140. And alternate exterior angles are supposed to be congruent. So because these were both 140, I know I solved for x correctly, and I solved for the measure of ZYN correctly as well. All right, and then my last example, go ahead and pause the video and see if you get what I get. Expect you to do this. All right. It says, bring this up a little bit more. It says if the measure of angle 1 is 94, so here's 94, and the measure of angle 3 is 37, is L parallel to M? Well, angle 1 and angle 3, they don't have an angle relationship. Corresponding consecutive interior, consecutive exterior, alternate exterior, they don't have an angle relationship. So we have to figure out what we can figure out based on vertical angles and linear pairs. So what I'm going to do is figure out if angle 3 and this one are supplementary, then that'll give me corresponding angles here and here. So I'm going to try to figure out this angle by subtracting 37 from 180. So I get, let's see, 143. Now that I figured out this angle, you notice that this angle and angle 1 are corresponding. And if the lines that form the corresponding angles were parallel, then our corresponding angles would be congruent. Is 143 congruent to 94? No. So, is L parallel to M? You would say no, because corresponding angles are not congruent. That's your reason why.